1954, and one of the world's first jet airliners takes off from Italy. The plane is the ultimate in high-speed luxury travel. But just 26 minutes into the flight, it explodes catastrophically. 35 people are dead. A team of investigators must solve the mystery of why this state-of-the-art aircraft disintegrated on a routine flight. What they discover in the wreckage will cause a turning point in the history of aviation. Disasters don't just happen. They're a chain of critical events. Unravel the clues and count down to those final seconds from disaster. Europe, 1954. 9:30 a.m., Sunday, January 10th, Rome Airport. Here, a dozen planes come and go every hour. On the tarmac stands Flight 781 en route from Singapore to London. The plane is a British-built de Havilland Comet. The Comet is the world's first passenger jet. The plane is powered by 4 Ghost jet engines and carries 42 passengers and crew at up to 800 kilometers per hour, almost twice as fast as its nearest competitor. To help it achieve this staggering speed efficiently, it flies at a height of up to 12,000 meters, where the air is thinner. 20 months after the launch, there are 17 of these aircraft in service. 9 are owned by the British Overseas Airways Corporation, or BOAC, and among them is Flight 781. In Rome Airport Terminal, members of the new jet set enjoy breakfast. And among them is renowned BBC reporter Chester Wilmot. He's returning home after covering a tour of Australia by the recently crowned British Queen. Chester is a devoted family man with 3 children. He's especially close to his 10-year-old daughter Jane, who was born deaf.
I did adore him. And I knew that he was busy, I knew he was on television, I knew he wrote books. But I don't think I even twigged how famous he was. He was just my dad.
At 10:18 a.m., all pre-flight checks are complete. Captain Alan Gibson signs to confirm that everything is in order. Flight 781 is just one of 5 BOAC services from Rome to London today. An older generation of slower propeller-driven airliners make up the other flights. At 10:19 a.m., a BOAC Argonaut, also bound for London, thunders down the runway. At 10:30 a.m., 11 minutes after the Argonaut's departure, the Comet taxis to the runway.
Roger,
Air traffic control grant permission for takeoff. 1 minute later, the high-tech plane takes to the air. The journey to London will be exactly 2 hours and 37 minutes. At 10:38 a.m., Flight 781 climbs to an altitude of 11,000 meters. To achieve this, while allowing passengers to breathe comfortably, the engineer operates a pressurization system from the cockpit. As the Comet rises, the air pressure inside the cabin is maintained at the equivalent altitude of 2,500 meters, a level easily tolerated by the human body. As Flight 781 climbs, Captain Gibson receives a message from Captain Johnson in the slower Argonaut that took off a few minutes earlier.
receiving.
Each pilot uses the plane's call sign. Pow Jig for the Argonaut, Yoke Peter for the Comet.
In due course, can you pass on height on cloud layer, please? Well, we're currently at 20,000 feet. And I'll let you know when we pass through. Roger, out.
At 10:51 a.m., Captain Gibson again radios the Argonaut.
George Howe Jig from George Yoke Peter. George Yoke Peter from George Howe Jig. George Howe Jig, did you get my message?
200 kilometers northwest, On the island of Elba, a group of Italian fishermen are repairing their nets. As they work, something extraordinary happens. They watch in amazement as flaming wreckage falls from the sky. 12 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. Chester Wilmot's family arrive at Heathrow Airport in West London to welcome the BBC reporter home. Airport staff mark the plane as delayed. 1:30 p.m. Flight 781 is now over an hour late. Jane Wilmot suddenly notices that all reference to Flight 781 has been removed. She decides to ask at the BOAC desk.
And I asked questions of why is it not there on the board?
Not on the list anymore.
Why is it gone?
Have you got someone with you?
Go and get your mother.
I'll be happy to speak with your mother.
Edith Wilmot is taken to a side room. Her children wait outside. Minutes later, Edith returns, visibly shocked and close to tears.
Darlings, there's been an accident.
She tells her children that Chester is dead.
I just couldn't believe it was happening. But I'm very upset because I knew he was coming home for my birthday.
In Italy, fishermen begin the gruesome task of recovering bodies. In total, 35 passengers and crew die on board Comet Flight 781. There are no survivors. The horrific crash is headline news around the world. The question on everybody's lips is how could the most advanced airliner in aviation history just fall out of the sky? Now, by going deep into the investigation, we can reveal the critical chain of events that caused the downing of Flight 781. Paul Withy is an aviation metallurgist. For 6 years, he studied the Comet investigation and is an expert on this turning point in aviation safety. But Withy needs to be sure that this landmark case actually did get to the truth.
In 1954, the investigation team had no black boxes. They had no flight data recorders. They had no way of understanding what was going on in the plane at the time of the accident.
Their best clue, the aircraft itself, lies at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea. Without the remains of the plane, the team know they must unravel the mystery with the flimsiest of evidence. The Italian fishermen provide a few clues.
I saw a huge ball of fire.
Captain Johnson, pilot of the Argonaut, deepens the mystery.
The radio went dead in mid-sentence. Everything just cut out instantly.
But it's the victims themselves that provide the biggest mystery. Within hours of the crash, Italian pathologist Dr. Antoni Fornari examines the bodies. Despite Fornari's considerable experience, he finds a pattern of injuries he has never seen before. Many of the bodies have fractured skulls, wounds he discovers that were sustained before death. He finds another puzzling clue. The lungs of almost all the victims are extensively damaged. Many have ruptured like an exploding balloon. It's a strange, perplexing picture, and he's baffled. With so little evidence, the investigation hits a dead end. Concerned, Prime Minister Churchill commands the Royal Navy to retrieve the wreckage of Flight 781 from the seabed. The wreckage lies at a depth of 120 meters, and no one knows exactly where. HMS Wrangler, an anti-submarine frigate, searches an area of 260 square kilometers. Then, on February 12th, 33 days after the crash, Navy experts identify the first piece of the Comet wreckage. Over the next few weeks, small bits of debris are sent back to England for examination. Meanwhile in London, the Comet fleet sits idle. BOAC hemorrhages cash at the rate of £50,000 per week. With so much invested in the aircraft, pressure builds to get the planes back into the air. On March 23rd, 10 weeks after the disaster, the British government give the airline the go-ahead to resume service. It's a terrible mistake. April 1954. While investigators urgently look for clues into the crash of Comet Flight 781. At 6:32 p.m. on April 8th, 16 days after the resumption of flying, a Comet takes off from Rome bound for Egypt. 33 minutes into the flight, the pilot reports that he's on course flying at 11,000 meters. A further 21 people are dead. Similarities between the two accidents are uncanny. Both aircraft were flying at an altitude of around 10,000 meters. Both crashed into the sea shortly afterwards. It seems there must be a flaw in the aircraft itself. Churchill acts decisively. He appoints the Royal Aircraft Establishment, Britain's leading aeronautical research centre, to investigate. Heading the inquiry will be Sir Arnold Hall. Hall has an impressive reputation. He's a Cambridge scholar and one of the outstanding scientists of his generation.
Sir Arnold Hall is a brilliant scientist, and he was one of those people who would let the facts speak for themselves and would make judgments based on fact, not on opinion.
The second plane to crash rests under 1,000 meters of water and is impossible to retrieve. The hope is that if they can establish the cause of Flight 781's crash, it will explain why the second aircraft went down. Over the next 4 months, 781's wreckage is methodically pieced together. As they examine each piece of debris, they find intriguing clues. Bits of carpet, pills from the first aid cabinet, and scraps of passengers' luggage are all found wedged into the rear end of the fuselage. It suggests an explosion at the front of the cabin that blasted personal belongings to the rear of the plane. As the wreckage begins to provide some clues, so too do the victims. 4 of the bodies retrieved from the second crash are flown to Britain for post-mortem. The pathologist finds identical injuries to those of Flight 781, fractured skulls and ruptured lungs. Hall has a hunch. Could the entire plane have burst like a balloon? After all, the pressurized cabin designed to keep passengers comfortable would mean that the aluminium skin of the Comet is highly stressed. Any structural failure, and it might simply explode of its own accord. To test the theory, they stage a pioneering experiment. The team build a Perspex model of the fuselage, 1/10 the actual size. The model is housed inside a pressure chamber. When the pressure in the fuselage is increased to 8¼ pounds, the equivalent of flying at 12,000 meters, the team deliberately rupture the model. Seats tear apart and fly through the air. The dummies catapult vertically and smash their heads on the cabin roof. The experiment appears to explain how the victims of both flights sustained such horrifying head injuries. Not only that, the sudden change in pressure would cause the air inside the victims to expand rapidly, rupturing their lungs instantly. If explosive decompression can explain what happened to both planes, the team must discover exactly what caused the weakness in the structure of the fuselage. Sir Arnold decides to put the entire airframe to the test. The experiment is on a completely different scale to anything they have attempted before. It requires the construction of a massive water tank, measuring 34 meters long by 7 meters wide and 5 meters deep. By May 29th, it's ready. engineers fill the tank and the plane with water. When they are both full, they force more water into the plane, pressurizing it as if it were flying. After 5 minutes, engineers reduce the pressure. Each test puts the same amount of strain into the aircraft as a single flight at 12,000 meters. Sir Arnold plans to test the fuselage to destruction. It could take up to 5 months. As the tests continue, there are other lines of inquiry. In mid-June, 5 months after the crash of Flight 781, the team assembled 2/3 of the fuselage onto a wooden frame. It's now clear from the tears in the metal that the aircraft has indeed decompressed violently and blown apart at the seams. By following the fractures back to where they started, they think the initial failure was probably at the front of the fuselage, somewhere between the cabin and the cockpit. But the exact cause of this tragedy is still a mystery. Then, on June 24th, the team running the water tank test has had a major breakthrough. Less than a month after testing began, after the equivalent of just 3,000 flights, the Comet fuselage ruptures. There is a massive tear in the aircraft's skin. The tear follows the line of the plane's windows and doors. But what triggered such a dramatic failure? There's one prime suspect, a phenomenon known as metal fatigue. It's something Paul Withy knows well.
This is a piece of aluminium sheet similar to that which was used on the Comet skin, but much thinner. One cycle of load isn't going to fail it at all. But if I repeatedly load it, like this...
Fatigue is caused when a metal is repeatedly flexed one way and then the other. After a while, minute cracks start to form. The cracks steadily increase in size, and eventually the part fails. But Sir Arnold knows he must come up with hard evidence to prove the theory. He must find a part of Flight 781 that shows signs of the fatigue. The team examine the split that has ripped along the side of the fuselage. By tracing the tear back, they find it starts at the forward escape hatch. This is not surprising. But when a door or window is cut into the plane, it weakens the structure, and the stress concentrates around the weakened areas. To investigate further, they rig another aircraft with strain gauges designed to measure stress in the airframe. The results are shocking. During flight, the stress to the skin around the plane's windows and doors reaches 70% of its total strength, 4 times greater than the rest of the aircraft's skin. Then the team discover an even more worrying detail. The supports around the windows are riveted, not glued as designed. The problem is, the rivets are punched into the metal, not drilled. This technique creates tiny manufacturing defects, which with repeated flying, can turn into fatigue cracks. Sir Arnold and his team know they're getting close, but they found no trace of metal fatigue on any of the wreckage from Flight 781. Then on August 12th, 7 months after Flight 781 crashed, an Italian trawler snags a large piece of wreckage. It turns out to be a section of the roof from 781's fuselage. The piece includes 2 small windows built for sending and receiving radio signals. Sir Arnold Hall and his team immediately find what they're looking for. A rivet hole in the corner of one of the windows shows a tiny crack. When they put the piece together with the rest of the wreckage, they find that all the cracks run back to this point. They have their missing clue. On Tuesday, October 19th, after 6 months of grueling work, Sir Arnold Hall presents his findings to a court of inquiry. But one detail fascinates Withy. In 1954, the techniques for analyzing metal fatigue were crude. The final piece of wreckage was examined with an ordinary microscope, and the team relied on experience to make their conclusion. Today, London's Science Museum safeguards the crucial piece of wreckage. Using 21st century know-how, Withy wants to look again at the wreckage and check that Sir Arnold got it right. To examine the damage in more detail, Withy makes an impression of the crucial area using a silicon-based putty. Then, Withy uses an electron microscope to examine the sample. Zooming into 800 times, Withy can see detail that Sir Arnold never could. He finds a tiny manufacturing defect, probably formed when the rivet was punched into the metal.
And it was that manufacturing defect that caused this fatigue crack to grow. And it's this image here that shows that Sir Arnold Hall and his team were right. It vindicates them in seeing that it was a fatigue crack, which then grew to failure.
52 years after the most groundbreaking and innovative investigation in aviation history, Paul Withy has conclusive proof that Sir Arnold Hall's results are absolutely right. Now, by rewinding the events leading up to that fateful crash, and by following the evidence uncovered during the investigation, we can reveal how Flight 781 was downed. 10:31 a.m., January 10th, 1954. 26 minutes to disaster. Flight 781 takes off from Rome Airport. Rivets punched into the aircraft during construction create microscopic manufacturing defects. Repeated pressurizations turn the manufacturing defects into fatigue cracks that get bigger with every flight. 19 minutes to disaster. Flight 781 climbs to 11,000 meters. As it ascends, the pressure increases and the aircraft's skin becomes more stressed.
George Houghton from George Hawkins.
5 seconds to disaster. A fatigue crack reaches 2 centimeters in length and the aircraft's skin rips apart. At 10:57 a.m., the shattered pieces of Flight 781 fall from the sky. 35 people are dead. The pain of the tragedy will never be forgotten, but the scientific understanding gained during the investigation is comfort to some.
I know it gave my mother a great deal of comfort that the test they did on the following the Comet crash did save people's lives later.
4 years after the crash, the Comet did fly again, but it never achieved the commercial success it once promised. In the interim, American company Boeing developed their own passenger jet and became the dominant force in the world of aviation.